All right. Now let's move on to some tips and tricks about Agile and Scrum. Okay. Now these tips and tricks used to be called Agile and Scrum, but I removed the word Scrum, but I kept these exact practices. That's because the questions about Agile and the PMP exam actually you can answer them mostly from the Scrum practices. Okay. Let's start. Now remember something very important, that whilst scope is fixed in Waterfall, in Agile scope is always flexible. So we always welcome changes. We're open to changes. Actually, we need to adapt with whatever feedback and changes that come from the users, the market, the stakeholders, etc. Okay. Let's start with some techniques, general techniques before we move on to specific agile tips and tricks. Now, the delivery cadence. Now, how many releases, how we will be delivering the deliverables or the product increments or the product itself. These should be defined by the project manager or the product owner. Okay, generally. Now, again, depends because in the PMP exam, sometimes the question is asking you about what should the project manager do, and by the word project manager, they mean the kind of describe the role of the product owner. Now, this is the dilemma sometimes about the role of the project manager and product owner, especially in agile projects. Sometimes PMI in the PMP exam mentions the product owner by name, like it states the product owner, and then you will pick the action that is that is supposed to be done by the product owner, as we learned in our training. But sometimes the word project manager, it could reflect the role of the product owner, or maybe the responsibilities of the product owner. From the scenario, from the situation depicted in the question, you will figure it out. Okay, definitely you will figure it out. Okay, but at least I must tell you, you should not be surprised if the question is actually talking about the project manager, but it's describing the role of the product owner. That's totally fine. Okay, now the delivery cadence or the delivery or the release the release is defined by the PMPO. Okay, and sometimes in consultation with the team, because you cannot, as a project manager, commit to something that the team cannot commit to. Okay, and also you can take any customer input into consideration. For example, in case the customer states that they have some commitments with their market, and they have announced that in some marketing or some announcements, so that will mean that your release plan will have to coincide with what the customer had promised their market, okay, or their users. So remember, PMI will always put you in real case scenarios. So really, you should expect questions from all types of industries. Really questions from any types of projects. Okay, you should not just expect those basic types of questions, and you will see in the next two sessions of this coaching program, you will see that what kind of questions we will be looking at, so you can really, have a better, idea about what you're talking about. Now, Agile values a collaborative team, working on creating incremental value in form of product increments. Also, Agile values involving the customer throughout the project in order to provide us with feedback, with input. Okay, and also Agile welcomes changes. Okay, so remember this. We should never reject or block or refrain from accepting changes in Agile. Okay, now customer involvement in Agile is really important because it is a source of feedback. In the review meetings of each iteration or the sprints. Okay, and also if you really want to avoid disagreements with the customer, involve them throughout the project, because as much as they're involved, that means they're really aware of what's happening in the project, and you will be able to avoid disagreements with them. Okay, so please, always when picking the answers in the PMP exam, always favor customer involvement. Okay, now let me tell you something important. A lot of our students told us that there are actually a lot of questions in the PMP exam about transitioning from waterfall to agile or from waterfall to hybrid. Okay, that is encouraged by PMI, so you should not back off the transition, even if your team does not know what to do exactly, actually you can always provide them with adequate training about agile methodologies, ensure there is a common understanding among them about agile, but definitely don't back off the transition to agile. Okay. In case there are a lot of change requests in the project, maybe consider switching from waterfall to agile. Actually, there's two here hiding. Let me just, yeah, all right, right, okay. All right. So now remember something important in the PMP exam, in case the situation depicts having a lot of changes due to regulation, for example. Okay, there can be regulatory changes, and the team is complaining of not being able to cope with all these changes. Then consider choosing an answer about switching from waterfall to agile. Okay, now to switch from waterfall to agile, that's your decision as a project manager. You really don't need to have an approval from a sponsor or stakeholders or a PMO. Maybe consult with a PMO in case an answer states that. But in case the answer does not state that, remember, you don't. Okay, you know what? Let me put it here. Uh, consult with PMO if necessary. By the way, the term VDO, Value Delivery Office, it was never almost mentioned in any of the PMP exams. So PMI is still using the term PMO even for Agile. Okay, so PMO is actually applicable on both Waterfall and Agile organizations. Okay, all right. In Agile, the main focus always is on ensuring the creation and the delivery of value in a continuous way. Okay, so in order to focus on creating, delivering value, you as a project manager slash product owner, you need to make sure that you understand from the customer what is value for them. Okay. All right. Now, we can use the progressive elaboration technique to detail the near-term activities and have an initial overview, just an initial overview on the long-term activities. So progressive elaboration is for having details on the activities that need to be performed right away, and just a general overview on the activities that will come later. Okay, that's a progressive elaboration. Iterations that are a form of a progressive elaboration. So yeah, I'll put it there. Oh, I can change it later anyway. Just put them in the same bullet. Okay. In agile methodologies and sometimes in waterfall, also we can use a form of a rolling wave planning, and that's through iterative cycles such as the sprints. Okay. So rolling wave planning, that means to plan for the near term activities and leave out the ones that will come later. Okay. Now let's understand the difference between these two adaptive approaches, or approaches from adaptive project management: the iterative approach and the incremental approach. Now, the iterative approach has got the goal of refining a product where the scope was not fully defined from the beginning, having many changes in the project, experimenting, actually relying on the empirical process to take decisions based on observations and experimentation. Okay, welcoming feedback. So in iterative approach, we depend a lot on feedback from stakeholders, from sponsor, from customer, in order to make the necessary improvements. And in the iterative approach, usually the delivery of the completed work happens at the end, either at the end of the release or at the end of the project. Okay, that's for the iterative approach. For the incremental approach, the goal is to speed the delivery, to reach the market as early as possible. So time to market. Usually in the incremental approach, we have a defined scope, minimum changes. We need to deliver completed functional increments, product increments that will help have early return on investment, and there is a possibility of delivering what was done at the end of each iteration. So both iterative approach and incremental approach both come from adaptive project management. Okay. but each one of them is used in different context. Okay, the full agile approach, or the general, they call it agile approach, or we call it the full agile approach. It's a mix in the practices between iterative and incremental. So, for example, we use full agile in case we will need a lot of feedback, but at the same time we need to deliver what's completed. Okay, then we go for the full agile approach. Lean, this is about continuously improve the processes and the work. Okay. Kanban, in the PMP exam, if you will have a question about Kanban, you will know, because it will mention a flow or a pool-based approach with limiting work in progress. Now, limiting work in progress, a flow or pool-based approach, that's depicting Kanban practices. And remember, Kanban is both an agile practice and also is that table which we use in order to track the progress on the or the stages of the task development. Okay. Now, if we move on to talk about Scrum practices, all right. So first of all, Scrum values transparency, and again, by saying Scrum, we mean mainly Agile, in the PMP exam, because in the PMP exam, it almost does not mention the word Scrum. Okay, it mainly mentions the word Agile. Okay, that's generally all right. Let's talk about some key Scrum roles. Now, we have the product owner, who is the voice of the customer, which means the product owner is the person who understands and knows the best what the customer wants. So the product owner is actually responsible, is the only one responsible for prioritizing work in the product backlog. So the only one who is allowed to touch the product backlog or the project backlog is the product owner. Please remember this. Okay, so the product owner prioritizes the value to be delivered and refines or updates. Okay, let me just put it here, or updates. Okay, either refines or updates the product backlog is the project slash. So the project, let me put it this way, because actually sometimes it can mention product. Okay, it can mention either, either of them. So actually the product owner prioritizes the value to be delivered and refines or updates the product slash project backlog. Okay. The Scrum Master, now here from Scrum, the Scrum Master role, generally the practices of the Scrum Master, they are, represented by the role of the project manager and the PMP exam, all right? Okay, not generally in applying Scrum, but just in the PMP exam. So, then here the project manager will be, acting, as a facilitator, as a coach, as a mentor, and as a servant leader, all right? That's the, favored leadership style. And the Scrum Master slash project manager is responsible for removing impediments and resolving conflicts, and also ensuring a proper work environment and a collaborative team. Okay. Now the team in Agile, in Scrum Agile, they're self-organized and self-managed, and they are cross-functional. All right. They're the ones responsible for planning and estimating their work. Okay. So they're the ones managing the sprint backlog. Okay. Now the product owner will set the goal of the sprint, as we saw in our training, but the team is the one that is responsible for deciding how to perform the work. Remember something very important. Now we will have different conflicting situations in the PMP exam in an agile project. So in agile project, you should never choose an answer which depicts using emails between the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the team. Among these Scrum key roles, we never use emails, okay? We use direct communication. The user stories, they are estimated in story points. You go back to our training and you check the slides about them. The acceptance criteria is part of the definition of done, and both user stories and acceptance criteria, they're part of the product backlog, which is maintained by the product owner. Tasks, they're part of the sprint backlog, which is maintained by the team, as we have mentioned here. Okay. Product backlog, sprint backlog, these are called project artifacts. Okay. Same as increment is also artifacts, Scrum board or Kanban board, and impediment log. Now, also in Agile, now let me talk about something important. Not everyone understands. Now, managing risks, managing cost, managing procurements, those are practices that we can have in either waterfall project, agile project or even hybrid project. So, managing risks, that's not related only to waterfall project management as some had understood. No, actually managing risks, that can happen also in agile. So actually now risks, they're addressed through iterative delivery. Okay, now when we have iterative delivery, that means we're minimizing the risks. Okay, contracts, they often emphasize flexibility and collaboration in agile. Now I have mentioned here two points, from risks and management and from procurement management. We have added them as part of our tips and tricks version 2. So please remember that in agile, risks are addressed through iterative delivery, whereas contracts in agile, they should emphasize flexibility and collaboration. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, something important in PMI's mindset. We have mentioned it in last week's part about PMI mindset. Now, creating an initial version, which is called minimum viable product or prototype or initial vision. That's for getting feedback and minimizing risks. And that's very important in case, for example, the customer or the stakeholder is not sure, whether they should proceed with the project. I'm talking about agile mainly, okay? Whether they should proceed with the project or not. So, what you can recommend to them, just recommend, is creating an MVP, a prototype, initial version, etc. MMP, which is a minimum marketable product, thus this to speed up the time to market. Now here it's mentioned MVP, prototype, a proof of concept. Sometimes this can mean the same thing or the same in some questions. Okay, so and these are favored for the first release in order to test the market. So in Agile Scrum, always think of having an MVP, a prototype as the first release in order to test the market. In the sprint of an agile project, the first day is always a planning meeting. Now, it's very important that you remember this. Now, questions about the steps in the sprint, please remember, guys. Questions about the steps in the sprint, the processes in the sprint, that's part of the process domain, which is 50% of the exam. Questions about the roles, that's part of the people domain mainly, okay? So the process of the sprint is first day is a planning, last day is a review, okay, in which we will have the demonstration from the team to the product owner and stakeholders. And after the review, there will be a retrospective on the same last day, okay? And retrospective is mainly for improving the ways of working, resolving impediments, okay? Or resolving, or finding the root cause. Let me pull it for you because it's really important, even though it's mentioned somewhere else. Okay, I think it's mentioned somewhere else, but let's say root. Let me pull it. Root cause analysis of issues, and also lessons learned. That's also in the retrospective meeting. Okay. So that's what we generally have in the retrospective meeting, okay? Improving ways of working, root cause of analysis of issues, lessons learned, etc. And also in the sprint, every day there is a 15-minute daily meeting. That's for status update and for checking the impediments, okay? You cannot skip and you cannot cancel the sprints. If you as a project manager cannot attend, then make sure that the team will carry on with the daily meeting, and then they can record it for you to watch it later. Okay. Now, something also very important is that in Agile, there are no other meetings and no other urgent meetings within the sprint, inside the sprint. No other urgent meetings are allowed between Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the team within the sprint. Okay, within the sprint. Okay, that's really very important to remember. Okay. Now, in case of any blocking issues in the sprint, so these are addressed during the stand-up meeting. By address, we don't mean discussing them, but they're addressed. They will be mentioned definitely during the stand-up meeting, the daily meeting. Of course, we will not resolve it, and okay, but at least it will be addressed during the stand-up meeting. I don't. Then what you need to do for blocking issues in a sprint, identify the root cause, then decide action. And in order to ensure that a certain problem does not repeat in the future, discuss it in the retrospective meeting. So please remember this. These are very, very important tips and tricks. Now, if you master these tips and tricks, be sure you will succeed in your PMP exam. Definitely you will pass it, okay? Now, you as a project manager, you need to defend the team from any interruptions they may get from the product owner or some of the stakeholders, and you must empower your team in order to take decisions and resolve solutions. Okay. Now, something also very important to remember, which is no changes are allowed in the middle of the sprint, because right after the planning meeting of the sprint will enter a freeze, will be frozen actually, and no changes are allowed. Now, now the product owner can cancel the sprint if it will not deliver the expected results or value. Now, we're talking about the sprint, okay? Um, the definition of ready is checked during the planning meeting, and the definition of done, it is checked during the review meeting. Okay, please remember these tips and tricks, guys. They're really, really important. Okay. Now, the burn down chart, this is used for tracking the remaining work in the sprint by the Scrum Master or the product owner, sorry, or the project manager, not the product owner, no, by the Scrum Master or the project manager. Okay, not the product owner, I'm sorry. In case if the line of work completed is below the line of the plan in the graph, and we will have next session questions about this, that means we are in good standing. Okay, that means the performance of the team is good. But if the line of the work is above the line of the usually it is a dashed line or discontinued line, which represents the line of the plan. Usually it is represented in a form of a dashed or discontinued line. If the line of the completed work is above the line of the plan, that's bad. However, in the burn-up chart, which is maintained by the product owner for monitoring the scope, the completion of the scope, okay? Remember, burn-up chart is for monitoring the scope, completion of the scope, and also changes in the release or the project, okay? If the line of work completed is above the line of the plan, that's good. Okay, that's contrary to the burn down. Okay, burn down, burn up are not the same. There will be, on almost most of the PMP exams, our students had a question about either a burn down chart or sometimes a burn up chart. Okay, so please remember this. Stakeholders, they definitely can attend the review meeting, and actually they're encouraged to attend the review meeting in case they are complaining that the team is not delivering the expected value or business benefits, okay, or business results, not benefits, business results, okay. Then you as a project manager, you need to make sure that the product owner has clearly and correctly defined the value and explained it to the team and reflected it in the backlog, in the project backlog. Okay. You as a project manager need to engage the stakeholders in the review meeting. So please remember what was mentioned in this bullet. You as a Scrum Master / project manager, you need to re-energize the team during the retrospective meeting. And as a servant leader, you make sure that you pay attention to your team needs and you discuss that with them. You need to, capture their needs, ask them about their needs, encourage them to share their needs. Okay. Now, in Agile Scrum, it's better if the team it's better if the team tries to maintain a consistent velocity across sprints. Okay, so it's not appreciated to have a descending or decreasing velocity, and the team should not try to always improve their velocity, but maintaining the same velocity, that's encouraged. Partially finished work, that's not counted into the velocity. Okay, and in case the budget has ended, then the work ends unless if the budget is extended, okay, or some funds are added. Some of our students told us that in the PMP exam they had a question about the Scrum of Scrums. Now, Scrum of Scrums, that's used for large projects with multiple teams. Okay, and here the Scrum Masters, they meet to share updates, and the questions that are asked in the Scrum of Scrums meeting are very similar to the questions being answered in the daily 15-minute meeting. The term lead time that describes the whole process end to end, and cycle time that describes, or that's the time between the process steps. Okay. So these are the tips and tricks for the agile. Now, before taking the break, let's have the tips and tricks about the waterfall. No,